We're going to start our VMware journey exactly where you will, which is on the VMware website, downloading the core components of vSphere. So you're going to want to go to vmware.com, click login and click on My VMware. And at this point, you're probably going to be creating an account if you haven't got one already. Of course, I already have, so just get logged in here. We're now logged into the My VMware portal, from which we will be able to see I already have an evaluation on the go here. If you haven't already requested an evaluation of vSphere, you can do so by clicking on trial and free products there. But I already have, so we're just going to click on download and go and download the product. So we'll start off taking a quick look at the downloads we have on offer. The first one, probably the most important one really, is the vSphere Hypervisor. That is what we're going to install onto our physical hosts and will allow us to create virtual machines on that host. The offline bundle is a zip file which you can use to either update manually an existing host or create a custom image file if you need any additional drivers. Now we'll come to that in more detail later on. You probably won't need to do that, certainly at this stage. That said, if you are running a lab, you may be running that in VirtualBox or Hyper-V, which may require you to create a custom image. There's plenty of tutorials online about how to do that, but it's not really in the scope of this course. The other thing we're going to want is VMware vCenter Server. What VMware vCenter Server does is it allows us to manage multiple hosts from one place, and it also gives us the ability to configure all of the advanced VMware features such as clustering, high availability, and the dynamic resource scheduler, all of which we'll come to in more detail later. So we'll let this download, and then once it is downloaded, the first thing you're going to want to do is take that ISO and boot a server from it. Now that might be a physical server, in which case you might be putting it onto a CD or a USB pen drive. In my case, I have another VMware vSphere host, which I'm going to create multiple virtual hosts on. So VMware supports nested virtualization, which allows us to run an ESX or VMware vSphere host as a virtual machine within another host. It's not supported for production use, however, it's really handy for when we want to do labs such as this. However you are booting ESX, once you do boot it, it will look something like this. So this is all pretty straightforward. Just enter to continue. We'll accept the end user license agreement, which of course we do all read top to bottom every single time. Of course we do. Sure. Select which disk. Now I will just give you a quick warning here. If you have a SAN attached to this system, if you're doing this in a live environment, don't be fooled by your SAN devices. They can show up in here. So if you've got something like a fiber channel or even a direct attached SAS or something like that, those SAN LUNs could show up in here. If you're not careful, you could find yourself overwriting the live disk for another machine. So we'll select continue, because of course I've only got one disk. Select the keyboard and enter a password. Now what this error here is telling us is the hardware doesn't have hardware assisted virtualization enabled. Now this technology on Intel, it's called Intel VT or Intel Virtualisation Technology. However, on AMD, it's called AMD-V, AMD Virtualisation. It's all the same thing. It allows the hardware, the CPU, etc., to get in on the process of dividing up resources. Takes one thing off the ESX software and, of course, gives us better performance. If you're seeing this error, then there's two possible causes, or probable causes, I should say. You're running it on a desktop PC, which has virtualization technology turned off by default in its BIOS, in which case I suggest you go to the BIOS and turn that on. Most servers have this enabled by default these days, although it could still be disabled if you are installing this on a server. The other possibility is if you are running your virtual ESX lab on virtual hardware, you need to configure your other hypervisor, whether that's vSphere or VMware Workstation or Oracle VirtualBox, to pass through the Intel Virtualization Technology flag. Now, how you do that depends on where you're running your lab. In my case, I'm doing this on an ESX server, so I would go on to the vSphere console and make that configuration. So I'm just going to say continue for now, and then F11 to install. Now, while that installs, we're just going to take a look at some of the core components of virtualization, what is a hypervisor, etc., etc.